Wherapy. Therapy wherever, whenever.
Welcome to the podcast. My name is Philip Andersson. I am a psychodynamic therapist and the founder of Wherapy. And in this podcast, Coffee with a Therapist, I talk about depression, anxiety, and all things mental health. And I do so whilst drinking a nice warm cup of coffee. By the end of it, it's usually lukewarm and a little bit disgusting, but I get through it anyway. And in this podcast, I'm going to talk about life problems associated with our 30s. And this period of our life, something that strikes me as quite typical of it is that we're stuck in an age, in a period where we either create something or we become self-absorbed. So by creating, I mean we either create a family or get involved in activities or do something career-wise or start a company, a business, or whatever. Or we become self-obsessed and look inwards and become very questioning of ourselves. And I think that theme is gonna pop up in this podcast every now and then. Yeah. So I'm gonna go put on a cup of coffee now, and I'll see you in a little bit. Before I begin, I just want to mention quickly my Therapy World Tour. Every week I publish 3 countries, a post with 3 countries, wherein I offer one free therapy session to one person from those countries. Yeah? And that post is obviously published on Instagram and Facebook. And I also have a copy of it on my website. And I publish this every Monday. But for those of you listening to the podcast on Sunday, or those of you subscribing to my newsletter, you'll get the countries one day ahead of time. And the first one of those countries is Costa Rica. So if you're from Costa Rica, feel free to get in contact with me, and I might offer you one free therapy session. So without further ado, let me tell you about the carnage that is your 30s. I'm just joking. Our 30s is kind of the period of life where we run into a brick wall a little bit. Yeah, we're met with a harsh truth. We're made aware of the fact that we're not special or unique anymore. And we're also made aware of the fact that we are not the first generation of adults anymore. We're the second generation. Now there's a bunch of 20-year-olds who are more energetic than us and pursuing life and have all this bravado and are trying to take over the world, and we're just thinking, well, those people seem obnoxious, yeah. But we don't realize that those people were us 10 years ago, yeah. And we, during our childhood, we've been led to believe that we're special, and this is the case for most people. I know it's not the case for all people. Some of you who are listening might have had a hell of a childhood, but most people have supportive parents who say, you can do anything you put your mind to, you know, and then they back us up when we fail. They help us find an excuse, and then when we grow up in our teenage years and then in our 20s, they provide financial support and emotional support, and then in our 30s, all of a sudden, the expectation of supporting someone in the 30s, that doesn't exist. So they kind of you have the rug pulled out from under you, you know? So and we're kind of stood there wondering, well, what happened to my dreams? Yeah, why didn't I pursue my dreams, or why wasn't I successful in achieving my dreams? Yeah? We're suddenly made aware of our insufficiencies, because that's all that is left. Yeah, and we feel like, well, we need to mask our insufficiencies because we're afraid of other people knowing them and other people questioning us. Well, why didn't you succeed, and why didn't you do that? Well, why didn't you do that thing that you said you would do? Yeah, and there might be a reason why we didn't do that thing we said we would do. Yeah, we might have been scared of failure. And in our 20s, we felt like we had all this time left and we could just kick that bucket down the road, or kick that tin can down the road, yeah, and pick it up later. And now we're kind of at the period of life where the buck stops at you. Well, now it's time to pick up that cup and do something with it, yeah. And that's where we're kind of stuck at that period of time, or we kind of fall into that trap and we get kind of scared, and then we have a relationship and we feel like that's constraining us. Well, I've got all this pressure, I have to achieve some sort of self-fulfillment, but I have a relationship that is holding me back. Yeah, and we grow kind of angry towards that person who we're in a relationship with, but we also feel quite comfortable with having that relationship there as an excuse. Yeah, well, yeah, okay, I can't really achieve my dreams because I'm going to focus on this, and I'm held back by my wife or husband, but I love them. Yeah. So we have that weird combination of animosity and kind of gratefulness towards our partner, yeah, and we also hold up our partner as somebody who is the perfect illusion, somebody who can kind of compensate for our insufficiencies. Yeah, I'm doing great because look at what type of person my partner is. Yeah, and somebody obviously feels like I'm capable of being loved, so yeah, don't ask any more questions, I'm fine. So we're stuck in a crossroads. We feel like this is the kind of final stop at the station, final stop. Yeah, either I can get off and I can pursue my dreams, or I can continue down this road of conformity, but I can't do both at the same time. And I also have a sneaky feeling that maybe I'm not good enough to fulfill my dreams, and I don't want to have that responsibility. Yeah, I don't want to realize that. So this other road is quite comfortable. Yeah. Or this other track, rather. I'm getting lost in all these analogies, yeah. But it is a period of harsh truth, yeah, where we've suddenly become a lot more aware of our insufficiencies, and we suddenly feel like the responsibility is with us and we have to make that choice. So this period of life is very scary and full of inner conflict and full of mixed feelings towards people, because they either help us or they hinder us, and they might help us and hinder us at the same time, and we get just very, very confused. So that was the first life problem, and as you know, it was quite complicated, so I'll just label it the harsh truth problem. The harsh truth. On to our next problem after this. Welcome back. The second life problem that we have in our 30s It's all about becoming a parent. Yeah, this is the period of our lives where most people become parents. Yeah. Some people become parents at an earlier stage, some people become parents at a later stage, but most people become a parent sometime in their 30s. And the first thing that happens when we become a parent on a psychological level is that we discover, we learn a lot more about our own parents and who they were and the trials and tribulations that they faced when they were raising us at our most vulnerable time, when we were small infants. Now that we're raising an infant, and depending on what kind of relationship you have with your parents, and if they're alive or not, or if you are incapable of meeting them, or so on and so forth, this can lead to like a feeling of great sadness, and as your children grow older and challenge you more, you'll realize that you were just like the child and you were treating your father or mother in that way, and that makes you feel guilty, and it also makes you feel a bit sad that kind of when you experience that you are in a state of maybe not knowing what to do, feeling lost in parenthood, and you know that, well, yeah, my dad or my mother, who maybe doesn't exist anymore, or I'm not talking to, or who I'm talking to, and have a good relationship with, they were going through the exact same thing as me. They were the ones who were feeling lost and overwhelmed, and were feeling like they were the worst person in the world when they happened to break down in front of their child, after their child had been nagging them constantly. So we feel a stronger connection to our parents because we suddenly understand what they were going through when they were raising us, and that might lead to a lot of feelings of guilt towards our parents, or guilt and sympathy, and these are heavy feelings, even though sympathy is a good feeling, or it has a good purpose. And we obviously compare ourselves to how our parents did, and whenever we compare ourselves to someone else, we always fall into the trap of making ourselves a little bit worse than what we really are. And this leads to us kind of hating on ourselves, saying that, well, how could my mom or dad do this, be capable of being a good parent when I'm not? Why am I making all these mistakes? And as I mentioned in the earlier point, a family limits our capability of achieving self-actualization, of pursuing our dreams, of pursuing our interests outside of work. And this is something that is very important to most people, because it pertains to our own identity, our own thoughts of ourselves, so we end up feeling like less of an individual when we are in a family, and that can create some animosity as well. I have no time for myself. I can't just go out and do something. I can't go back to school because I have a 2-year-old that I have to take care of, or my 3-year-old or 7-year-old, or whatever the age they are, won't give me any time to read a book, or won't give me any time to go out stargazing, or whatever we want. So we feel like our children own us, and for a period of time they do, but we we become a little bit bitter, and we have a little bit of animosity towards them because of it. Yeah, and we also, especially when our children are so young, we feel so alone with our child. Yeah, and this might probably pertains more to women than men, depending on which country you live in. But parental leave, usually it's the mother that stays home the longest, and they feel overwhelmed with with raising the child, making sure that they eat, making sure that they drink properly, and that they're feeling good, and that they're happy. And the child can't really speak at this age, obviously, when they're quite young, and we don't know what's wrong with them, and we have to kind of fix it. And there we're standing all alone with this baby. Our husband is at the office, our parents are maybe living an hour or two away, and we just don't know what to do. We feel like we're all alone, and we're responsible for a life. Yeah. And that's quite overwhelming. Yeah. And we feel helpless in this. Yeah. And this, we feel like we're not good enough, and this leads to us being panic stricken. I don't know what to do, and that can make a lot of mothers a little bit hysterical at that time. Yeah. And then their husbands come home, and they say something, and the mother, the wife, reacts in a way that the husband might feel like an overreaction, but they're just actually bearing the brunt of, or feeling like overwhelmed from the day's events, and all of this leads to a sense of bitterness, which I will go into more in the next section. So stay tuned. So before I continue with the podcast, let me introduce the second country in this week's Therapy World Tour, and that is Iran. A lot of things going on over there right now. If you're from Iran and you live in a different country, or you're from Iran and you live in Iran, please send me a DM, and you might be the person that I have one free therapy session with. So get in contact with me, DM or email info@wherapy.com. And the next thing that I want to talk about, in the last part of the video I talked a little bit about bitterness and feeling overwhelmed at not being enough, and that spills over into marital problems, and that's what we're talking about now. Our 30s are riddled with marital problems, specifically relating to sex. Yeah. And now this sounds a lot like we're talking about a couple that has an infant child. Yeah, I realize that as I'm speaking. Yeah. But since most people have started to have children in their 30s, then that's where these issues arise. Yeah. But children and our commitment to them, especially infant children, but also older children, means that we don't have that energy that we used to. Yeah. And it feels like it leads to us having less sex. Yeah. And some people are more accepting of that than others. A lot of people have a naturally low sex drive. This is something that a lot of relationship problems start. This is one key aspect that can lead to a lot of relationship problems, is if our sex drive is different. And our sex drives vary throughout our lives, but they also vary from person to person. So if you're a couple and you both have low sex drives and you're accepting of that, then this period of your life is gonna just like putter along quite well. But if somebody has a stronger sex drive than somebody else, then it's going to lead to quite a lot of friction. Yeah, and in our 30s, it is, I have no science to back this up and no data, so I'm just speculating here, but most men seem to have a higher sex drive, from what is reported at least, yeah, in our 30s. And women, if they have given birth, a lot of the time the sex drive plummets. One, because of the physical toll that pregnancy and birthing a child has on the body, and two, because of some animosity towards the man, because the man doesn't have to go through that part, and the man, how much they help, like, no matter how much they help, the man is almost unable to reach an even amount of work when it comes to child rearing as the mother, because the child craves more from the mother. The child is more connected to the mother, especially during the first 2 years. That's fact, based on psychological findings that I've learned a lot about during my university. I don't know who it was, but we studied a lot about attachment theory, and a lot of studies back that up. So the mother is aware that she can't escape her duties, yeah, to this person. Yeah, she is a slave to her child, and the father can help her out, but can't help her out as much. Can't help her out enough for her to be able to escape for a little bit of time. Yeah, and that feeling of not being able to escape is what creates the bitterness and the anger towards the man. Yeah, and subconsciously they can withhold sex because of this. Yeah, because they feel like, oh, now I've been offering my body, my mind, and my soul to this child for the whole day, and you're just coming home from work and expecting me to offer it to you as well. Hell no. Shop is closed. Get out of here. And that obviously leads to some conflict between the pair. Yeah. And during the first 2 years of life, the man, since they're unable to reach an even amount of workload when it comes to child rearing, the man has to kind of think differently. Yeah, in this case, they have to be the one who supports the wife and helps with the emotional, but also the logistical and other things that the wife needs. Yeah. So and kind of doing that and making sure that happens consistently will work against these issues. But a lot of marital problems arise around sex, and a lot of drastic changes in our sex drives arise as a result of a new child being born into the family, and that usually happens in our 30s. That's why it's a common life problem in our 30s. So, on to our final country of the Therapy World Tour, and that is Angola. So if you're from Angola, send me a DM or an email, info@wherapy.com, and I will, or I may rather, because there tend to be quite a few who contact me, I may give you one free therapy session, and if that's the case, I look forward to talking to you a lot. But on to the last point of the last life problem of our 30s, or commonly associated to the 30s. And that's loneliness. Until now, we've spoken about relationships a lot, and there are a lot of people who aren't in any relationships in their 30s, and this is something that can create a lot of inner conflict, because and I talk a lot about 3 types of inner conflict, and one of those types is a motivation. We want to have a connection to somebody versus a reality, we don't have it, and therefore we have that inner conflict. And having that inner conflict for a long time creates the depression. But there are some differences in terms of gender norms when it comes to being single in our 30s. Hopefully those norms will go away over time, and I think they are in certain areas of the world. But in general, women tend to feel a little bit maybe embarrassed that they don't have a partner in their 30s, because the common kind of thought around finding a partner is that the man is the person who pursues, and the woman is the person who just makes herself available if she wants a partner. So in this dynamic, or this dynamic rather, means that the woman hasn't been chosen, and they have no way of kind of escaping the fact that people think this way. So even if the woman has, in this case, has made a choice to be single in her 30s, and has broken up with a man who she didn't want to be with, and is just pursuing life, pursuing all the other good aspects of life, people can still think that, well, how come you're single? Why is nobody dating you? And that leads to a lot of kind of embarrassment and feelings of insufficiency. Whereas the man, in this case, unfairly, has the ability to blame someone else. Well, I just haven't found the right one. Because this dynamic exists, where the man pursues and the woman just makes herself available. So the dynamic is very unfair. But that doesn't mean that the man is, in this case, sad that they are alone. And I think if they have been alone long enough, then the embarrassment will be there, because the people that are around them and have been around them long enough know that, well, there must be something that's wrong. There might be something he's not telling people. So when we're in our 30s, we always get questioned about why we are lonely, or why we are alone, whilst when we're in our 20s, we don't. It's just somebody who's enjoying their freedom and enjoying the smorgasbord of all other people that are around there. But this feeling of being alone, the loneliness associated with it, makes us think about the meaning of life. And when we search for the meaning of life, we realize how meaningless our lives are. And we find trouble dealing with that. And when we're stuck in this, when we're stuck in this loneliness, we also have other people in our lives, like friends and cousins, relatives, who might be the same age as us, who are inviting us over to dinner with their family, and we're the single person, and that feels weird. Or even worse, they're inviting us over along with another single person, and they're trying to match us up, which also feels weird. So our being single becomes a problem for society as well. It's not only a problem because we're lonely, other people are perceiving it as something that is a problem, so there's a lot of loneliness in our 30s. And as I mentioned, in comparison to being alone in our 20s, where loneliness is seen as freedom, being alone in our 30s means that we are insufficient. And we should be able to change loneliness, remark it a little bit, to see it as solitude. But that's something that is more accepted by society the older we get. So we're in a little bit of but we're between a rock and a hard place in this one, and we can't really escape the loneliness being seen as pure loneliness, and it being on us, our problem, that we are alone. So this is a very typical problem associated with our 30s. And that, guys, ladies and gentlemen, was the podcast. And if you liked it, please give it a thumbs up or give it a rating on whatever platform you are listening to this to. And also consider subscribing and consider following on all our social media accounts. And I just hope that you have a really great day and that you are feeling at peace with yourselves. I love you guys. Take care. Bye-bye.